Next teaching in the Nevi'im, or the prophets, is in the book of Ezekiel. It'll be in the 4th chapter. Now, in previous weeks, we've talked about who the prophet is. Talked about where he lived. He was living among captives on the Hebar Canal. He was living in a life, in a situation where Yisrael, the land, Israel, and Jerusalem were just dreams to the people. And it's easy in that time, just like it's easy in our time, to believe that it was easy for them to believe that they would never again go home. It's easy for us to believe that we will never see that city. And it may well be that in this life, before the resurrection, we won't. But we have a promise of a Jerusalem that is greater than the one that stands today or the one that stood in Ezekiel's day. But he saw a vision, and we spent the last 3 weeks talking about the vision, and we've established, I think, almost beyond a shadow of a doubt, that in his vision he is speaking with Mashiach. He is speaking with Yeshua HaMashiach in a precarnate form. We've seen the flickering candle, which represents the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, and we've seen the essence of that flame carry up into what appeared to be the upper body of a man, but it was made of something that shone like amber from the inside. And we've talked about all of the things that points to, all the things in that passage that points to his being conversing one-on-one, literally with the word of Elohim, his presence. We have talked about what that means for us as Messianic believers, and today we're going to go a little farther into that vision, beginning in chapter 4, verse 1. And you, O mortal, take a brick and put it in front of you, and incise on it a city, Jerusalem. Now, a lot of people see this, and I've seen it depicted in movies, I've seen it depicted in children's books, that here is this man, and he has this little red brick, like what we build brick houses of today. Okay, but the Hebrew does not seem to indicate that. This was not a small thing that he brought out and laid out, and people said, oh, that's interesting, and walked by. What he was being commanded to do was to bring a large hewn stone, probably something that it was near impossible for one man to move by himself, if possible at all. He probably would have had to have help to do this. And he brought it out to a place where no one walking by could just disregard it. He brought it out into a public place because he was going to be demonstrating to his people, to our people, to the people of Elohim, the price of sin. You know, we live in a time when we're told it's not okay to call sin sin. We live in a time where saying that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, and that's how Elohim designed it, and no one can change that, is considered politically incorrect and can lose us a job, can lose us status. We live in a time where to say that a man and a woman are put together for the purpose of procreation among other things, and that any scientific attempt to do anything else is an abomination, can have us stoned, can have our homes burned down. It's happening. We live in a time where to say that to eat what is unclean is not holy and not set apart. And when we say that to keep the kashrut, the kosher, it's the root of kosher, is kashrut, to keep the law of what is clean is unclean, and to live separately and distinct and set apart is considered judgmental of people who do the things that we do not do. And we live in a time period when to keep the Shabbat faithfully, the sign that is between us and him, just as kashrut is between us and other people, so that they see that we don't belong to the world, but to him, Shabbat is a sign by which we can show our children and our children's children and our children's children's children who we are, that we belong to him, because on the Shabbat we come and give ourselves entirely to him. And it's a reminder between us as his people and him as our Elohim that we are his and he is ours. But to say that in public, to say that at a workplace where no one else observes Shabbat, can have your job threatened, even though that's not legal. People do it all the time. I believe we are once again living in the days of Ezekiel. Ezekiel lived in a time when the children of Elohim had gone so far into sin that they had practically forgotten who they were. And most of Yisrael today, whether they profess to be Yisrael and aren't living like it, whether they have a bloodline like everyone in this room does and yet deny Mashiach, whether they're Gentile Toshav, and they say, yes, I love the Elohim of Abraham, but I don't need his Torah. We live in a time where people are asleep at the spiritual wheel. We live in a time where we as believers are being called to carry a brick into a public place, to set it up where no one can say that they have never seen it, and to use it as a demonstration. What that brick is for each of us is between us and him. But we are called, each one of us, to walk into the public arena, and despite the fact that it is not seen in a favorable light, to set up a testimony to him. Verse 2 says, set up a siege against it, and build towers against it, and cast a mound against it, pitch camps against it, and bring up battering rams round about it. He's setting up a model of a siege. Then take an iron plate and place it as an iron wall between yourself and the city, and set your face against it. Thus it shall be under siege. You shall besiege it. This shall be an omen to Beit Yisrael, to the house of Israel. I don't know how many times I read this passage before I realized that even as the word represents Abba, the Father, the prophet represents the word. And when he says put an iron plate as an iron wall between you and the model of the city, he's saying The sins of this city and the sins of this people are like an iron wall that they have put between me and them. Then lie on your left side and let it bear the punishment of Beit Israel. For as many days as you lie on it, you shall bear their punishment. For I impose upon you 390 days corresponding to the number of years of their punishment, and you shall bear the punishment for Beit Israel. When you have completed these, you shall lie another 40 days on your right side and bear the punishment of Beit Yehudim, the house of Judah. I impose on you 1 day for each year. Now, this is a common theme throughout prophecy. We see it in Ezekiel, we see it in Daniel, we see it in Revelation. That a day that is dictated represents a year of human time. We see it even in the Moedim, the holy days. We see the counting of the Omer for 49 days, and on the 50th day we celebrate. And it is a picture of 49 years counting to the Jubilee in the 50th year. There's a code throughout Scripture between days and years. And here we see it again. And he's told the number, not of days, that he's told the number of days that he'll lie on one side that represent captivity for Beit Yehudim. And we're told the number of days he'll lie on his right side that are captivity for Beit Yehudim. And some scholars have tried to say, well, it's not like he laid there all day, every day, without getting up all of those days. But the Hebrew says something very different. You remember last time we had this talk, last time we were in Ezekiel, and we talked about the bonds that Elohim said that he would put on him. It didn't say that the prophet would put the bonds on himself and tie himself down, or that he would have his wife do it, or he'd have a family member do it, or he'd have a friend do it. He didn't say that men would come from the city and do it. He said that he himself would put the bonds on him. And I told you, I don't even believe that they were physical bonds. I don't believe that Elohim tied him down with a rope. I believe that Elohim put him down on the ground, unable to move by the power of the Ruach HaKodesh. And people tell me that that's reading too much into the word, but I don't know that we can do that in this case. I believe reading too much into it would be adding the words that somebody came and tied him down, or that he did it himself. It literally says that Elohim would tie him down, and I believe that's what happened. Then, with bared arm, sign of strength, set your face toward, he sees Jerusalem, and prophesy against it. And this word prophesy is interesting. We've talked about this, I think, earlier in an earlier chapter, but I want to reiterate. This word prophesy is so misunderstood today because people believe that it means to foretell what is going to happen. It literally means to tell forth what is going to happen. There is nothing that we are about to read in the rest of this book about, or anywhere in Scripture, that was done to Israel as a people that was not promised in Torah as a curse if we did not obey the commandments. If we did not take the mitzvot seriously. By the way, commandment, I think I've told you many times before, is a poor translation there. If we did not take those connections between us and him very seriously, Now I put cords upon you, here he says it again, so that you cannot turn from side to side until you complete your days of siege. Does that sound to anyone here as though he got up when the sun was going down and went in and relaxed? No, it sounds to me very much, very clearly to me, that for the number of the days that were ordained, the bounds were on him and he could not move. And people say, well, Elohim wouldn't do that. Did he take away the speech from Zechariah the priest for the number of the days of his wife's pregnancy? Did he shut up the skies for 3.5 years and promise that he'll do it again? Did he make it rain 40 days and 40 nights so that 150 days there was a flood on the earth? And yet people say that he could not literally have done what it says that he's done. Further, take wheat, barley, beans, lentils, millet, and emmer. Put them into one vessel and bake them into bread. Eat it as many days as you lie on your side, 390. Literally, become a vegetarian. Go without meat to sustain you for 390 days. The food that you eat shall be by weight, 20 shekels a day. This you shall eat in the space of a day, and you shall drink water by measure. Drink 1/6 of a hin in the space of a day. And the word hin there is an assumption made by the translators. It says, literally says to drink 1/6 in the space of a day. And simply going off of the language and the way it worked at the time, the Hebrew language at the time that Ezekiel was writing this, was seeing this, having this prophecy and recording it, that they believed that it referred to a hin. So he's telling him that every day of his prophecy, every day that he is bound in the spirit, he will be limited to what he can eat and how much of it. He will be limited to what he can drink and how much of it. And believe me, laying in the heat on the hottest days of the year in Israel, or that he wasn't in Israel, he was in captivity, but he was not far from it. He was just across the Euphrates. But laying in the heat of that region at that time would have been misery. And then he had to ration his water. Eat it as a barley cake. You shall bake it on human excrement before their eyes. Human feces was what he was going to be given for fuel, for his fire to cook. So, said Yahuwah, shall the people of Israel eat their bread, unclean among the nations to which I will banish them. He says, you have not trusted in me, you have not followed my word, you have not kept the mitzvot. If you want to live like the children of the heathens, that's fine, you can go live among the children of the heathens. And you wanted to follow their Elohim instead of the Elohim of your fathers, and therefore you can eat things their way and be unclean as they are. Then I said, Elohim, Yahuwah Elohim, my person was never defiled, nor have I eaten anything that died of itself or was torn by beasts from my youth until now, nor has foul flesh entered my mouth. this passage, in case anyone still believes that a certain other vision, Cephas, Peter, of the unclean beast coming down in the tablecloth and rise, Peter, kill and eat. And people say, see, the food laws were done away with. No. What did he say back to Elohim? He said exactly this. He was quoting the prophet saying, no, give me, don't tell me to eat this. Remember that I've never done anything like this. And we're about to see why he quoted the specific passage because he knew the response. He answered me, see, I allow you cow's dung instead of human excrement. Prepare your bread on that. And as terribly nasty as that may sound, technically kosher. It may be something that none of us would ever desire to do, but it's technically clean from a biblical standpoint. Because everything that comes out of a cow has been processed properly. The cud has been chewed. The four stomachs have processed it, and it is clean feces. And so when Cephas says, but I've never eaten anything unclean, he knew that if he cried out in those words to Elohim, that his words would be honored as the words of the prophet were honored, and he would be given a different answer. And he said to me, O mortal, I am going to break the staff of bread in Jerusalem, and they shall eat bread by weight in anxiety, and drink water by measure in horror, so that lacking bread and water, they shall stare at each other, heartsick over their iniquity. Heartsick over their iniquity. Iniquity there, a lot of people look at that and say iniquity is just sin. Sin literally means to miss the mark, to come up short. Iniquity literally means a willful transgression of the law. Not, I fell short today, I need to do better tomorrow. A willful transgression of the law. Not, I didn't know it was wrong, but now I know it's wrong and I'm turning away. An acknowledgement that it is wrong and sinful and breaks the heart of our Creator, and we do it anyway. And every person in this room, including me, is guilty of that. And that is what sent our ancestors into captivity. And that is what keeps all of Israel as a people from going home today. That's why we're not getting on a 747 and flying home and basking in the glory of the blessings that we were promised if we will just keep the mitzvah. That's why we're here in an unfinished building in southern Indiana where it snowed in April. Instead of there, watching the fields mature and looking forward to the first harvest of the year. We're here where we can't even plant yet. And if that's not a picture of what sin does to his people, I don't know what is. Do we have a midrash on this topic? Yes.
Okay, so lentils, millet, and
There's different types of greens. Lentils they're technically a green, but they're more like a pea.
You said
In my the ones I've eaten, I'm told there are different species of lentils, so I don't know specifically what would have been grown there at that time.
I was asked because you said basically vegetarian. After studying how to make unleavened bread this week, I made it. So I would say it's actually going vegan because you can make bread without milk. Since you had water.
I don't think that that time in that frame there would have been that distinction, but that's just me. And by today's standards, you're probably right, but I don't know if you would have looked at it that way.
I know this is a measurement, but like, what would it be ahead of in the space of a day?
Well, it's a sixth of a hen, is what they guess that means. And like I said, hen is an assumed term there because they're using shekel, which is a temple measurement, and the liquid version of that is hen. And so since it doesn't say what it is, that's part of why the translators believe that, okay, if he's using a shekel temple term for the solid, then the liquid, it only makes sense that he would be referring to a temple terminology there. And so they make that connection that way. Exactly what a sixth of a hen comes out to, I want to say that a hen is roughly 1.5 liters. Okay, so a sixth of 1.5 liters, but I would have to look it up to be for sure that's exactly what it comes out to. Melik, you're shaking your head, is that correct? You okay.
But can I say something? Or
Absolutely.
Verse 16, your translation, and you said, moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, behold, I will break the staff of bread in Jerusalem. They shall eat bread by weight and with care, and they shall drink water by measure and with astonishment. And you said, looking at each other, heart sick.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's much better translation than what I have here, because I can see that day coming.
We're on the verge of it.
I think so too.
Jordan, you had a question?
I was just thinking that with Jacob, actually, my question was Brad's question. How much is a sixth of a hen and a lot of measurement to try and visualize that?
When we go to Oneg, we can look up exactly what a hen equals out to.
I think you're probably right about that. We can look at it. But when Jacob said, I don't think that this, well, two things. First thing is, even today I've seen this mixture of breads, people still bake. They actually have, they call it Ezekiel bread. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but
I've seen Ezekiel bread. I've never looked at what's in it.
I'm pretty sure it's the exact mixture. Not saying they cook it the same way
Yeah.
that he did, but
Hopefully not.
yeah, I would think not. But just,
Much rather have it in an oven.
it's and also I wouldn't think that if you cooked it over human dung or cow dung that it would be vegan because it's cooked over that. Yeah.
Yes, Jacob.
So I'm not saying I want to test this out, but how is dung flammable?
Well, it's dry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was
In
that.
the Plains Indians and settlers later on used buffalo dung to build fires on a regular basis.
And yes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The methane in the dung.
Yeah.
If he was basically fastened to the ground by spirit, how was he able to move around and do that? Because he'd have to be real close to that.
You know what? I've always just in my mind envisioned that he had it right there where he could reach it. Now, whether someone was coming along that he had asked beforehand, his wife or someone coming along and bread, refilling that, or whether he ate really stale bread for the whole length of time, I'm not sure. I doubt it would, I mean, if my carnal mind says, well, bread that went stale that long would have been moldy and he would have got sick and died, but this is Elohim, he can do whatever he wants to do. Just like the bonds being put on him, he can do what he wants to do. So exactly how that worked out, I'm not sure. I don't know of anywhere in scripture that tells us exactly how that worked. So I'm just going to trust that Elohim had a plan and gave it to him. Yes.
With Jacob's comment, one thing I could see is maybe his legs were bound and you could still move his arms and upper torso.
Well, I said he laid on his side for those days, so.
You could still move his arms though. Possibly.
We don't know exactly,
we don't know.
exactly how the bonds were put on. So we don't know. Exactly
I would think that it, again, we don't know, but I would think that the one he was laying on, the other one, he could probably move, but basically. Like.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Okay.
What's the significance? You might have already said this. I was trying to listen. What's the significance? Why is it? So it's 390 days, 1 day a year for Israel, and 40 years for Judah.
I believe, and this is based on something I have read. I haven't studied it out as well as I probably should have. But something I read a long time ago is actually like kind of a subsection, like almost an aside in another book on a different prophecy. It's actually on Daniel's prophecy. But I believe that has to do with the number of years that they had not been keeping Shabbat in the holy days. You got to remember we're talking about a divided kingdom at this time, and you had the Beit Yisrael was going to be in captivity much longer than Beit Yehudim. And you have to remember that when it all played out, Beit Yisrael went into captivity long before Beit Yehudim, and remained so long after. And the actually ended up the majority going into diaspora, which is part of how we ended up here today. So that is my understanding, that it has to do with how many times they had not kept, I want to say, the Sabbath of years. I believe it was how many times they had not kept let the ground go, go fallow. I almost said go fertile, that was wrong. It wasn't fertile anymore because they hadn't let it go fallow every seventh year like he commanded. And so that is my understanding of that. It definitely deserves to be studied out. But I think Yaakov was my only child at the time that I read that book, so I would go back and study on it again. Yes.
And I just want to say that this is more of a comment. Americus was created or founded in 1776. And so how many years ago is that now?
241.
241. Wonder how many of those years have people not kept
right
the same thing. Word remains. And now I understand there's what you understand, what you know, but how many people have Bibles in the U.S.? How many people people profess to read, to believe the whole Bible, but then they don't read it or they don't follow it?
There are places in the world where people have every excuse not to be doing what they're supposed to do. This isn't one of them. Even if you're too poor to own a Bible, anybody can walk into a church or a synagogue someplace and pick one up and learn what we're talking about right now. Let's vote, and people don't do it. So,
you can go to the Dollar Tree and buy a Bible.
Right, but there were times in America where you couldn't, but there's never been a time in the United States where there wasn't a church Bible somewhere in those communities.
Right.
And then by word of mouth, it could have been taught, and that's not been done effectively. I mean, a lot has been taught, but a great deal of it has been extra biblical things that people have added in rather than getting down into the word. Yes, sir.
I'll make a comment.
Yep.
All around the world, many people, in other nations, but the United States, such shame, the Christians over here, because they have to suffer persecution in order to meet together to worship God. And they literally continue to do that, even if their lives are threatened, and many of them are killed constantly for doing that. It's really sad. It really is. There's millions of Sabbath keepers in China, and they're persecuted. They have to meet secretly. But I'm just saying it's sad.
It is. It is. I think about our Messianic brethren in Israel. Only within, I mean, it's been within the last few years that the Knesset has even allowed them to publicly worship. They had to hide their beliefs, or be at best be expelled from the country for years. I think about the Speakman family who lived there for, I don't know how many years they lived there, and somebody found out that they were Messianic, and when they were questioned about it, they admitted to it, which, we're not to deny him for who he is, and they were expelled from the country not even knowing where they were going. And thankfully, I forget which country it was, some ambassador heard about it and gave them asylum. But yeah, that was just in the last 2 or 3 years, and everything they owned was in Israel. Everything they ever dreamed of was there, and they lost it all because of their faith. Yes.
I just want to say that I agree with you on the completely agree with you that one day we will see in the next life, if not in this life, we will see the renewed Jerusalem. Although I do believe that for the reason like you just said, that if we don't make it to Jerusalem, if we don't move there or something, that there's a reason, and maybe the reason is like you just said, because they expelled Messianic believers from the country in this crazy world. That's what happens.
Well, my understanding is they're not doing that now.
But that was a
few years ago they were doing that, and now it's my understanding you can go and openly practice Messianic beliefs. They have Messianic synagogues, but that are popping up all over Israel. But it wasn't that long ago that was illegal, and it's still illegal to walk up to an Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox Jew and try to share the gospel with them. You can be arrested for that. So that's. I don't believe you can anymore. On a first offense, I don't know if they continue to catch you doing it, it might be different. I don't know how their law reads right now. Are there any other questions? No? Okay. Melech, would you give us a closing prayer for the first portion of the service?
Everlasting one, creation, we thank you for the instruction we've received this afternoon. Thank you for these teachings, inspire them in our minds so that it's become alive in our minds, so we understand your way and how we're supposed to respond to it, and help us to set the kind of example in the world that will cause your name to be glorified, because your name deserves to be glorified. We ask this first part of our service to be closed now. We ask this through the name of Messiah. Amen.
All right. Before I forget, next week we will be doing things in a different order. Jacob and I will have to leave probably halfway through the service, if not sooner. So we will do our teachings first and then turn things over. So things will be almost kind of backwards, middle first instead of first and last. We'll see. But we'll see what we can do there. Because we do very much want to be a part of the service, even though we will have to be traveling that afternoon. So That will be the plan for that.